Okay, here's a question from Greg LaBelle. Mr. Koukl, I recently received this reply from a friend. How do I use Columbo on this reply? And here's the question. I am not the religious type of person. I believe in divine power, and my closeness to that power is best described as spiritual.
I mean, what I was just going to say is I'm not sure what that even means. But of course, that question in my mind suggests the first Columbo question. What do you mean by that? So again, that's a model question, and my impulse would be to say, so you believe in God, is that right? You said something about the divine. Do you believe in God? The God that you believe in, is he personal or somehow impersonal? I'm not sure. Let him talk. So then, therefore, that's not religious. You're spiritual, right? I'm not sure what this distinction is. So, and now what? So you believe there's a God, and you have a spiritual nature. I agree with both of those things. Now what? It sounded to me like those things were offered kind of by contrast to my view. But that is my view as far as it goes. What about the rest? Your God, what is your understanding of God? What does God want from us? Anything? Do we have any obligations to the God? You are spiritual, so you're in touch with your spiritual side. Great. I once, by the way, told a woman who said to me, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. I said, yeah, God made you that way so you could know him. Okay, so now what? So really this conversation, all the questions that I would ask Columbo style are ones to draw the person out to offer me more clarity on their view. Now, what I think this person has done is done nothing. They are aware of their spiritual nature of some sort, and they are aware that they're not alone. That's it. Okay? Notice that it gives... in their mind, it's laudable because they're acknowledging the spiritual realm, but it's not demanding because there's no demands of any sort that are suggested in any way by that. And the spiritual but not religious crowd, this is why this is so appealing. You can kind of acknowledge an obvious element of humanity, that there is an invisible realm that we are in touch with, and we have a capacity to connect with that. Yet at the same time, you don't have to do anything about it because there's no sense of obligation. And this is where I'd want to start probing. What if it turns out that this God does care about the way we live? And I suspect you think he does. Is your God good? Does he want us to be good? What does that look like? Are we good? By the way, that's a real important question, because when we ask that question to people, they say, well, it's like, yeah, God's good. He wants us to be good. I said, are you good? And you know what they always respond?
I try.
I try. Exactly. I try. I said, wait a minute, that's not the question I asked. I said, are you good? Now, the answer tells me that they know they're not. They're just trying. And they think the trying is adequate. Okay? Well, as long as I'm trying, that's all that's necessary. Because they feel they're pretty good about themselves. Something like 75% or 80% of the people in this country believe in hell, and almost none of them think they're going there. Isn't that something? Because the qualifying line for good that goes from basically bad to basically good, is always somewhere below where that person perceives themselves on the moral scale. Always. Even people in prison.
Yeah, you've probably heard me talk about that study they did where they all thought they were good.
Yeah.
Because they're comparing themselves to the people around them. And
Yeah.
so what that study found is that we're not very good at determining whether or not we're good.
Mm-hmm.
We're just used to who we are, I guess.
So that would be the directions my questions would go. It's mostly a request for more information about the specifics of their view. And the goal here is to help them to see that they haven't thought about this at all. They have no view. And that's why I want to ask more. What if it turns out that your divine whatever cares about how you live and is going to make you account for it. That's what my sense is. That's what Jesus thought. By the way, I was tempted to say that's the biblical view, but that's not the right way to talk about this with people, because you don't want to refer to a book. You want to refer to a person they respect. That's what Jesus thought. And we read some of that in one of the earlier shows, John chapter 3. Judgment's coming.
Yeah, what do you mean by spiritual? Seems like the obvious place to start. And you didn't even really get into this, but you can also ask, how did you come to that conclusion?
Right.
Why do you think that's the true way to look at God?
Mm-hmm.
Because they might not have answers for that. They might have answers, but they might not have answers for that either. So both of those questions, just as they are, and then the conversation as it goes, I think will lead from there. But I think that's asking what they mean by spiritual is a great place to start.
Notice there's nothing clever required of Greg in this situation. It's just the first two Columbo questions, which doesn't require you to know anything but the questions to probe what and why. That's it. And constantly, time and time again, I've seen using those questions just to try to gather more information forces the other person to think about their own convictions, which they have not clarified even for themselves.